Greetings, and welcome to a conversation about our experience and this time in the life of our country. Some are even calling it an episodic moment in our history. I can't say I disagree with this as I watch the debates, discussions, insults, arguments, and physical fighting between various groups of people regarding the future of our country. And I say our future because what will happen in these next few months will no doubt have a significant impact on the day-to-day actions of our collective existence. But I believe that something, or moreover, someone is missing from this conversation, and that is us, the Xers. For some time now, I have watched as millennials and boomers have argued back and forth about the direction of our country, each expressing their perspectives and unique needs and experiences. But there are others of us who will also be impacted by the future direction of our country. I am Felix, the Xer, and I'm here to add the X element to the mix. So I must admit, I do agree with the tone of the chatter that's going on in our country right now. However, I don't believe that the generations that are sandwiching me actually understand what the issue is that's plaguing our country right now. There are many conversations going on regarding women's rights, veterans' rights, civil rights, LGBTQ rights, homelessness, taxes, dissatisfaction with our political and economic systems, dissatisfaction with the candidates who are running for office. Although all of these topics are extremely important, they are not the issue that's plaguing our country, merely symptoms. Let me clarify. But first, I have to give a little bit of history so that you understand my perspective. I know. I'll try to make it quick and not too boring. So you can't talk about American history without first talking about the Founding Fathers. These were men who were well ahead of their time and lived through an age of what's called the period of enlightenment. These men believed in two very radical ideas for their time: capitalism and democracy. As Americans, we all have some idea of what these words mean, but I'm going to go ahead and give definitions at this time. Capitalism is an economic system that's based on free and competitive markets, private ownership, and limited government interference. Democracy is a Greek word, and when translated, literally means people power. In America, it means that we are responsible for our government, and we do this through a system of representation. Looking at these two definitions, we see that there is some compatibility between the two theories. However, at the same time, there is an inherent conflict. It is this conflict that lies at the heart of the issue that has plagued our country now and then. This issue can be summed up in one question. That question is our democracy a servant of capitalism, or is capitalism a servant of our democracy? The Founding Fathers struggled with this issue. Their debates, discussions, and disagreements over the ratification and creation of the Constitution did result in a document that can be changed and modified over time, and this will become important later on in the video. However, their answer to the issue, the question, is democracy a servant of capitalism, or is capitalism a servant of democracy? The answer for them, democracy would be a servant of capitalism. And for evidence, you need to look no further than the location of our country's first capital, New York City. This is where the American stock market and exchange was generated. You also need to take a look at those first individuals who were allowed to vote, allowed to politically invest and control their own material well-being. Wealthy, land-owning, white males. Now, I hope that you heard that I placed an emphasis on wealthy, land-owning, and not white males. I say this not because I'm trying to agitate or annoy anyone. I'm saying this because I want to point out that it's this time that the malleability, the flexibility, our ability to modify and change our Constitution created what I think is our first woke moment. A challenge to that idea that those founding fathers had. A challenge to this idea that our democracy serves capitalism. This woke moment is probably one that not too many people are aware of. Remember, the right to vote was not based on age, race, sexual orientation, or gender. It was based on wealth. And so about 30 years after the Constitution was ratified, white, non-land-owning males petitioned and eventually won the right to vote, the right to politically invest in their material well-being. And so this began an ideological tug of war that is at the issue at the heart of our country. It began our fight over the very nature, the very soul of who we are as a people. And so began that tug of war over the ideology of what's going to be the foundation of our country. Those non-land-owning males pulled on that rope, expressing that capitalism serves our democracy. The next tug, however, is probably the most famous one for our country, and that's the Civil War. However, it's not the tug that you would think it is. In fact, this was a tug where democracy was used to support capitalism. Again, let me clarify. The 1800s was a great time of technological advancement. A lot of that advancement was in the form of the mechanization of manual labor. The result? This put it at odds against the main labor trade of the time, the slave trade. So this put those individuals who wanted to capitalize on that new technology at odds with one of the primary labor forces of the time. What better way to eliminate that competition by eliminating its source, slaves? And so the country went to war with itself as our democracy was used to service capitalism. And I say this because of the lives lost. The rise of the industrialist, a group of mega wealthy individuals, and the interference of the voting rights for freed African American men as well as other men of color, and the outright denial of voting rights for women. After this war, some individuals, mostly male, encouraged by the increased wealth of the top industrialists, engaged in speculative investing in the industrial growth of the country. The results were cycles of financial booms and busts of the American economy, including 2 Great Depressions. In the middle of this occurred the next yank on the rope, which was also a democracy servicing capitalism moment. This moment took place at the beginning of the 1900s, when the wealth of those early industrialists and investors was accessed by their wives and daughters. These women, in turn, used the mechanisms of the Constitution to gain the right to vote in 1920, and their right to politically invest and control their own material self-interest. Meanwhile, large groups of Americans had to adjust to an economy based on industry rather than agriculture, and lived in hopeless and mind-numbing poverty. The Second Great Depression, which began after the stock market crash in October of 1929, only exacerbated the financial distress of the country. Industrialists believed that the situation could be remedied by the mechanisms of capitalism and used their political influence to push for monetary policies reflecting their beliefs. However, these industrialists forgot that by 1930, most Americans had the right to vote. And with that right, for the first time since the early 1800s, we had another capitalism-serving democracy woke moment when the American people elected Franklin Delano Roosevelt for the presidency. Now, why is this tug so important? Well, it starts with the fact that FDR is unique in the role of the occupant of the White House. While every other president has served no more than 2 terms, FDR was elected to the office of president not once, not twice, not thrice, but 4 times. So not only did the American people tug on that rope once to state that capitalism serves democracy, they tugged a second time, a third time, and a 4th time. The result was many of the structures and services of the federal government that we rely on today. Furthermore, these structures have carried the country through 2 world wars, international conflicts, domestic upheavals, and social unrest. But the election of FDR did not put an end to this ideological tug-of-war for our nation. It has continued back and forth for the past 90 years. And so, here we are in 2024, a nation divided as we wrestle with all of these symptoms: women's rights, civil rights, veterans' rights, LGBTQ rights, bodily autonomy, taxes, homelessness, dissatisfactions with our political and economic systems, dissatisfactions with the people who are running for office. All of these things that are troubling our country are just symptoms. However, we can begin to treat these symptoms. I believe that we can move past these divisions and come together as a nation. But first, we must make a choice once and for all time. And it's not necessarily about politics. It's about who and what we are as a people. Do we believe that our democracy is here to service capitalism? Or do we believe that capitalism is here to service our democracy? This is a very personal question and should require a lot of deep thought by each and every voter in our country this election season. I offer this not as to suggest an answer, but to get us all to start thinking about our collective future. Nevertheless, I know some accusations will be made and posted in the comments section. So in my next video, I will address the insinuations that I am proposing either socialism or fascism. I'm Felix the Xer, and I'll see you then. Cody, come on. Let's go downstairs.
Don't want a competition.